A few weeks ago, the whole world was caught up in a frenzy of sorts when Jaguar went public with its new persona and identity. And if you thought that campaign and announcement was polarizing, wait till you see this. The first concept of the new reinvented and reincarnated Jaguar is the Type 00. A grand tourer in form, the concept highlights bold new design language and some brand signatures or symbols.
With the Type 00, you're not getting just a show car or a concept car. It is so much more than that. It's the reimagining and reinvention of the Jaguar brand. Now let's understand why that was important to even do in the first place. This isn't just about repositioning the cars or the brand. It's also about returning Jaguar to its position that it used to occupy a few years ago.
The repositioning, though, will take Jaguar into the uber luxury space, where average price points of its cars will now effectively double. The brand will no longer compete with the German 3, for instance, and instead will focus on being a luxury brand in the league of Cartier or Louis Vuitton.
So there's an acknowledgement, and a very open, transparent one, that maybe the last 20 years, the strategy wasn't quite right. And what does that mean in terms of the cars you're going to get? I'll talk about that in just a bit. First, let's focus our attention on the Type 00, because through it, you see the 4 new characteristics or symbols of brand Jaguar. Now, before we get into those 4 symbols or the 4 pillars of what the new design and overall language of the brand is going to be, let's try and understand what the brand itself wants to stand for. Modernity, of course, goes without saying, because it's trying to chart a new sort of a path into the future. There's also fearless creativity. That's an interesting term. You'll hear that a lot more from Jaguar going forward, and which means that there aren't really any limits to what you might see in terms of just this bold new direction when it comes to design, and also application of that design inside and out. And exuberance is another word that's been tossed around a lot today in the presentation. It's one that we can expect more when the production cars come in. Now, we'll talk about those production cars in a little while, but let's now talk about those 4 symbols, if you will. The first one is the device mark. Now, that's a nice term for what we typically just say is logo. It's a new complete font as well that's been devised just for Jaguar. You see that very clearly in the way the name is very proudly put in the front of the car. What you also see in the front is that new design language has a very upright face. That's intentional, and that's something that will translate to the production cars, we're told. It's also not a grille because, well, they're only going to be electric, so they don't need a grille. And that's emphasized in a way in this design, something you don't really see with a lot of luxury electrics. The second thing we want to talk about is what they're calling strike-through. Now, again, if you think about it, it's about positive and negative surfaces that are sort of evenly and proportionately divided. You could also call them stripes. And you see that showing up in many places on this concept. And so in the front, you see it very, very directly on that face. I'm not going to call it a grille. You also see it in the roof in a way where you think that it's a metal roof because of the slim lines, but actually it is see-through and it lets the light into the cabin. You also see it on the alloy wheels where the pattern has this incongruous design. Again, those stripes, that's very distinct. And then in the tail lights, as well as the way the rear is finished, you see the strike-through very clearly. That's going to be important because you'll see that very distinctly on those production cars as they roll out post-2026. The third symbol is the color world. Now, I'm going to talk about this particular color in just a second, but you're going to see a lot of primary colors, especially colors like yellow, blue, and red represented in the new brand in the future. But that's going to be more outside the car, says Jaguar. We'll have to wait and see what that really means because it's hard to understand that today, which means that the inside might be a little bit more muted, but on the outside, the exterior as well as maybe the dealership experience, you'll see a lot bolder color in the future. Now, on this particular show car, on the Type 00, you're seeing this pink hue. It's a frosted metallic sort of a paint. And the reason for that is an interesting one. They're calling it Rodon Rose. And it comes from the fact that you see a lot of brass elements. There's a little bit of it outside on the fender. You have a lot of them on the inside, which we'll show you in a second. that was part of a very detailed and specific thing that the design team wanted on this car. And when they actually saw some of these brass panels that were allowed to oxidize over time, they picked up this pinkish hue, and that's an interesting story, and that's why they finally arrived on this color for the show car. Will it make it to the production cars? Who knows? It could be a signature color in the future. They're not telling us any of that right now. But you do see that brass element, and on that you also see something called the maker's mark. Now that's where the leaper has been reimagined. So while the old logo and the old font and the old typeface is gone, the leaper does make it to the new Jaguar as well. And so there's a slightly different version of it. You'll also see a lot more of the leaper in the digital interfaces of the brand going forward, says the company.
The maker's mark also gets embodied through this, a double J of sorts that becomes almost like a seal or ingot. The official name being given to this color on the concept is Miami Pink, since the car is debuting today at the Miami Art Week. A second identical concept has also been produced in London Blue.
Now, there's a lot to take you through when it comes to the interiors, but I have to tell you that when it comes to show cars, we've seen things like butterfly doors, we've seen the floating seats and the floating consoles, because of course, this isn't about being a production car, it's about making a statement and talking about things that could happen. That also talks to then the new themes or the totems as they're calling them. But the part that really got my attention was a very interesting aspect about these dual screens. Now you see them, there's lots of information on them. Dual screens, you're seeing those on a lot of cars as well. What's new? The fact that you don't always have to use them, and when you don't want them, they will actually just fold away. Now, that could have an interesting production application in the future, because what it points to is the digital detox that many of us talk about. Is that unsafe though, you might think, when you're driving potentially a car which has something like this? Well, at the base of the windscreen, there's still a little slim screen there which gives you the basic information or the information you need as a driver, so that you still have that. In the future, you might have head-up displays, but imagine that, just being able to put it away and enjoy these nice clean lines, enjoy maybe the great outdoors, better views. It's an interesting thought, it is different, and certainly points to a sense of luxury, because what Jaguar says is, time is luxury.
And that is a nice thought, isn't it? Expect a production car in the similar GT body style as the first of the new Jags. That is already testing in the real world and will likely be followed by a crossover and a sedan. But none of this will happen before 2026. That's when the first car will go on sale to the chosen few high net worth buyers.